Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro Revenge Story. Full disclosure, this happened about 3 years ago in 2022, so some details might be a bit hazy. I ran it by my mom, who was right in the middle of it all, and she said it's accurate enough to tell the story right, so here we go. It's a long one, so there's a summary at the end. Background. Our house is seriously old by American standards. Not just old, we're talking pre-Civil War old. Built around 1850 by some local merchant, it predates most of the town itself. With that age comes this massive property line that's barely changed in the last century, except for a few tweaks here and there for roads and new housing developments. Something most people don't know is that in our town, the official town plan is the final word on property lines, and according to that plan, our property actually extends into what our neighbor thinks is his yard. That detail matters quite a bit to this story. Now, let me introduce you to the main players. First, there's our neighbor. I'll call him Rick. Real piece of work, this guy. He ran this sketchy car operation in his backyard and seemed to have some weird vendetta against trees. Like clockwork, every year he'd disappear for 2 weeks in July. Remember that, it's important. Then there's my mom. She works in government compliance now, but she used to be in legal affairs, where she trained district attorneys, even trained some state attorneys general. While she wasn't high up the ladder, she had everyone's respect because she knew the law better than most lawyers. If there was ever any kind of legal question, Mom was usually spot on with her interpretation. "Hey, can I trim those branches hanging over my driveway?" Rick asked one day, gesturing at our Manitoba maple. "They're scratching my truck." Mom looked at the tree thoughtfully. "That seems reasonable. Get a quote from a professional landscaper and we'll look it over." "Great, thanks," Rick said, though something in his tone should have warned us. A few days later, we were out for the day. When we got back, Rick came over with this smug look on his face. "Don't worry about that landscaper," he said. "I took care of it." Mom's face went pale. "What exactly do you mean by took care of it?" We walked over to where our beautiful maple had been, only to find a stump painted with some weird gray chemical. Nothing ever grew there again, not even mushrooms. "What the hell did you do?" Mom demanded. Rick shrugged. "Those branches were a hazard. I did you a favor." "A favor? You destroyed our tree!" I shouted. "Prove it," he said with a smirk and walked away. Mom stood there for a long moment, then got this look in her eye that I knew meant trouble. "Oh, we're not done here," she muttered. Over the next few weeks, she made dozens of calls to the town planner, building inspectors, landscapers, and contractors. She pulled the official town plans and property records. Every evening, she'd be at the dining room table with papers spread out everywhere. "What are you planning?" I asked one night. She looked up with a slight smile. "Justice. Just wait." The revenge like clockwork, Rick took off for his annual July vacation, and Mom's plan kicked into action. "Are you sure this is legal?" I asked as the contractors arrived. "Every single bit of it," Mom replied, holding up a thick folder of documents. "I've triple-checked everything." Over those 2 weeks, we completely transformed the property line. The contractor, Mike, became a regular fixture. "Ma'am," Mike said one morning reviewing the plans, "this is some of the most precise property line work I've ever seen. You've really done your homework." "Had to," Mom responded. "Everything needs to be exactly by the book." We watched as they relocated the fence, rearranged the shrubs, and tore up Rick's precious gravel driveway. In its place, we put fresh soil and grass seed. The crowning touch was planting a weeping willow in just the right spot. "This willow," Mom explained, pointing to the sapling, "will grow right over his yard. Every fall, he'll be swimming in leaves, and there's nothing he can legally do about it." The new fence placement was genius. It left Rick with barely half a meter of driveway width. Even better, it put his illegal chop shop operation on our side of the property line. "What about all this car stuff?" I asked, gesturing to the parts scattered around. "Since it's illegal, legally it's just scrap metal," Mom said, already on the phone with the local salvage yard. "And since it's now on our property..." When Rick returned 2 weeks later, he found his yard significantly smaller, his driveway mostly gone, and his chop shop disappeared. His face turned an impressive shade of red as he stormed toward our house. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. Mom calmly stood on our porch, flanked by the town's civil engineer and a lawyer. "This," she said, holding up a stack of documents, "is the legal property line according to the town charter. Everything we've done is completely within our rights." "You can't do this," Rick sputtered. The lawyer stepped forward. "Actually, sir, they can, and they have. These documents outline everything in detail. Would you like to review them?" Rick's face went from red to purple. "I'll sue!" "With what evidence?" Mom asked calmly. The same kind you had when you cut down our tree? The aftermath was even better than we expected. Rick tried pressing charges, trespassing, destruction of property, you name it. The judge took one look at Mom's documentation and dismissed the case. You want to know the best part? Mom told me later. He had to put in a new driveway, properly this time, with permits and everything. Cost him a fortune to have the sidewalk modified too. I guess you could say he really branched out into some expensive renovations, I joked. Mom groaned at the pun, but smiled. Well, he should have thought of that before he messed with our tree. Updates and aftermath. By 2023, things had gotten interesting. Rick tried to make the best of his situation, but you could tell it was eating at him. He started mowing his lawn at 7 a.m. sharp, the earliest allowed by noise ordinances. Really? I said one morning, watching him aggressively push his mower. Every single day? Mom just sipped her coffee. Let him waste his gas. We've got a better show to watch. She was right. That dying maple tree we'd claimed with the fence line, it became home to a family of woodpeckers. The constant tap-tap-tapping drove Rick crazy, but the birds were protected species. Nature's karma, Mom would say, watching the woodpeckers at work. Then something unexpected happened in early 2024. Rick approached our house one day, looking uncomfortable but determined. Listen, he said, shuffling his feet. I'm planning to convert the house into a duplex. I could use some advice to make sure everything's legal this time. Mom raised an eyebrow. Oh? Learned something about property laws, have we? Look, I know I messed up with the tree, Rick admitted. I just want to do this right. Their relationship became, well, let's call it professionally cordial, at least until the new threat emerged. The plot thickens, Mom, I called out one evening in late 2024. You need to see this. A notice had appeared on the vacant lot behind our properties. Some developer had gotten approval to build a 3-story apartment complex with underground parking. They can't do that, Mom muttered, studying the notice. The bedrock's too close to the surface. To everyone's surprise, Rick showed up at our door the next day. Have you seen this nonsense? The apartment complex? Yeah, Mom replied. They'll destroy our property values, Rick said. Plus, there's no way they can dig deep enough for parking. We're practically sitting on solid rock. Mom smiled slowly. You know, Rick, I might have some ideas about this. And that's how we ended up with the strangest alliance in neighborhood history. Mom and Rick started working together, poring over zoning laws and building codes. The developers rushed this through during the holiday break, Mom explained one evening as they sat at our kitchen table. But they missed some crucial geological surveys. Rick nodded, actually looking impressed. And with the water table issues in spring... Exactly, Mom replied. Plus, there's the matter of the access road requirements they haven't addressed. By early 2025, things got even more interesting. The original contracting firm's CEO had faced some legal troubles, forcing the developers to hire a more reputable company. They took one look at the site survey, Rick told us, actually chuckling. Told the developers it was impossible to build their underground parking without spending millions on rock removal, which would make the whole project financially unfeasible, Mom added, looking satisfied. The resolution: the developers are now stuck with a half-acre of essentially useless land. They can't build what they wanted, can't sell it for what they paid, and can't develop it without major modifications to their plans. You know what's funny? I said to Mom recently. If Rick hadn't cut down our tree, you two would never have ended up working together on this. She smiled. Sometimes the best allies come from the strangest situations, though I don't regret what we did about that tree for a second. Neither do I, Rick admitted, having joined us for coffee, something that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. But I still hate that willow tree. Oh, we know, Mom and I said in unison, watching the willow's branches sway gently over his yard, dropping their leaves right on schedule. The next one is an entitled people story. My son Jake had just turned 7 that April, and we were excited about spending our first summer in our new neighborhood. We'd moved to a nice suburban area with a community pool that was open to all residents. The pool wasn't technically part of any HOA. It was owned by the city and maintained with our tax dollars. This detail becomes important later. The first few weeks of summer were great. Jake made friends with some neighborhood kids, and I'd take him to the pool 3 or 4 times a week. He was taking swimming lessons and improving fast, so naturally he wanted to practice as much as possible. It was a Tuesday afternoon in mid-July when everything went down. I was sitting on one of the pool chairs watching Jake play with 2 other kids. He was having the time of his life, splashing around in the shallow end where the water only came up to his chest. I was keeping a close eye on him. I'm not one of those parents who just sits on their phone the whole time. I noticed this woman arrive with what looked like her teenage daughter. From the moment she walked in, something seemed off about her. She was wearing this ridiculous wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses like she was trying to look like a celebrity. She scanned the pool area with this disapproving look, then whispered something to her daughter. They set up their stuff at the opposite end of the pool, and the daughter got in the water while the woman stayed on her lounger. About 20 minutes passed without incident. Then Jake and his friends started playing this game where they'd jump into the pool, making small splashes. They weren't bothering anyone. They were in their own little section, and there was plenty of space between them and other swimmers. Suddenly, I heard this shrill voice. "Excuse me! Can you control your child, please?" I looked up to see the woman with the hat standing over me, arms crossed. "I'm sorry," I said, genuinely confused. "Your son is splashing water everywhere. My daughter just had her hair done, and she can't get it wet." I tried to be reasonable. "Ma'am, we're at a swimming pool. People are going to splash." "Not in my pool, they won't," she snapped. "I'm on the neighborhood board, and we have rules against excessive splashing." This confused me even more. "This is a public city pool. There's no neighborhood board that controls it." Her face turned red. "Do you know who I am? I've lived here for 15 years. I know the rules." I was getting annoyed but trying to stay calm. "Look, the kids aren't bothering anyone. They're just playing. If your daughter doesn't want to get wet, maybe a swimming pool isn't the best place for her." That set her off. She started ranting about respect and entitled parents and how kids these days have no discipline. I tuned most of it out and just kept an eye on Jake, who thankfully hadn't noticed the commotion yet. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she finally declared like she had any authority. "We're not going anywhere," I said firmly. "This is a public pool, and we have every right to be here." She stormed off, and I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. About 5 minutes later, I saw Jake getting out of the pool to get his water bottle from our bag. As he was walking back to the pool, this woman appeared out of nowhere and grabbed him by the arm, hard. "You need to stop splashing right now," she hissed at him. Jake looked terrified. I was out of my chair in an instant. "Get your hands off my son!" The whole pool area went silent. I reached them in seconds and pulled Jake away from her. He was crying now, and I could see red marks where she'd grabbed his arm. "What is wrong with you?" I shouted. "You don't touch someone else's child, ever!" "He was running by the pool," she said, suddenly defensive. "I was preventing an accident. He was walking, and even if he wasn't, you have no right to put your hands on him. None." By this point, the pool attendant had come over. He was a college kid, probably 19 or 20, and looked completely out of his depth. "Is there a problem here?" he asked nervously. "This woman just assaulted my son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want the police called." "I did not assault him," she scoffed. "I was enforcing pool rules." The attendant looked confused. "Ma'am, you don't work here. You can't enforce anything." "Do you know who I am?" she repeated like it was her catchphrase. "My husband is friends with the mayor. I sit on multiple boards in this town." The poor kid looked even more confused. He turned to me. "Do you want me to call the police, sir?" "Yes," I said firmly. "She put hands on my child. I want it documented." While the attendant went to make the call, I took Jake to the side, dried his tears, and checked his arm. The red marks were starting to fade, but he was still shaken up. "Daddy, why was that lady so mad at me?" he asked. "She's just a very unhappy person, buddy," I told him. "You didn't do anything wrong." Meanwhile, Karen was on her phone, presumably calling in her connections. I heard her saying things like disrespectful and threatening me into the phone. Her teenage daughter looked mortified and was trying to blend into the background. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. 2 officers, a man and a woman. Karen immediately approached them, launching into her version of events before they could even introduce themselves. I could tell from their faces that they were used to dealing with people like her. When they finally got to speak with me, I calmly explained what had happened. I showed them the marks on Jake's arm, which were still slightly visible. Several other pool-goers came forward as witnesses, confirming my version of events. The female officer took Jake aside and spoke with him privately, which I appreciated. Kids will often tell the truth more freely when parents aren't hovering. After gathering all the information, the officers went back to speak with Karen. I couldn't hear everything, but their body language made it clear they weren't buying her story. She was getting increasingly agitated, waving her arms and pointing at us. Then I heard her clearly say, "Do you know who my husband is?" The male officer replied, "Ma'am, I don't care if your husband is the president. You cannot put your hands on someone else's child." That's when she lost it completely. She started screaming about how we were all against her, how the pool was going downhill, and how she was going to have everyone fired. She even took a swing at the female officer when they tried to calm her down. And just like that, Karen was being handcuffed and read her rights. The charges were assault on a minor and assaulting a police officer. As they led her away, she was still screaming about her connections and how we'd all regret this. Her poor daughter was left standing there looking humiliated. I felt bad for her and told her she could call someone to pick her up. She mumbled thanks and said her dad was already on his way. The aftermath was a whole ordeal. We had to go to the police station to give formal statements. Jake was brave through the whole thing, but I could tell it shook him up. We had several follow-up meetings with a prosecutor who explained that Karen, whose real name was Deborah, had a history of similar incidents around town. Apparently, she'd been banned from several businesses for harassing employees and customers. The case didn't go to trial because she took a plea deal. She got probation, community service, and was ordered to take anger management classes. She was also banned from the pool for 2 years. The most satisfying part came a few weeks later. I ran into a guy at the grocery store who recognized me from the pool incident. Turned out he was on the actual city recreation board that oversaw the pool. He told me that Karen had never been on any official board or committee. Her husband wasn't friends with the mayor. In fact, the mayor had a restraining order against her for harassing his office staff. She'd been living in this fantasy world where she had all this power and authority, but it was all in her head. Jake eventually got over his fear of the pool, though for a while he would ask me if the mean lady was going to be there before we went. It broke my heart, but kids are resilient. By the end of summer, he was back to his happy, splashing self. I still see Karen around town occasionally. She always looks the other way or suddenly becomes very interested in her phone. Her husband actually approached me once at a gas station to apologize. He seemed like a decent guy who was trapped in a relationship with a nightmare. The whole experience taught me something important. Standing up for your kids is always the right move, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. And no matter how loud someone yells about their authority, it doesn't make it real. If there's a silver lining, it's this. Jake now knows that if an adult ever makes him uncomfortable or tries to touch him without permission, he should tell me right away. That's a valuable lesson, even if we had to learn it the hard way. The next one is an entitled people story. After my sister was evicted from the family property, she went to live with her crappy best friend who eventually kicked her out. And then she started living with her abusive boyfriend who was also her drug dealer. This guy was messed up in the head and a rage monster, but he was also really smart and fixed up and resold cars despite legally being on disability. The first time I met this guy, I could tell how two-faced he was and wanted to be as far away from him as possible. Then one day, my sister called me crying. Her boyfriend had stranded her and her puppy in an unlivable camper trailer on the side of the road, and he was holding the other two of her dogs, her cat, and the title to a car she'd bought from him hostage. He did leave her with another car, but it was a crappy Volvo that didn't even run, and the guy had busted out the rear window with a hammer in one of his rage fits. My sister called the police, but the cops told her he can break his own stuff and there wasn't much of anything they could do. I came running to help my sister after she called, despite all the years she'd made me utterly miserable. Her boyfriend's parents came running to help too, because even they know he's insane. And together we managed to load all my sister's stuff into my truck, but my sister has no sense of getting rid of unneeded things when forced to downsize, and my F-150 barely contained it all. Then we had to go back to her boyfriend's apartment to get back her pets and car title. The guy had lockpicked my sister's safe and stole the car title out of it, and he repeatedly denied it with a crap-eating grin and gaslit. He and my sister spent like an hour shouting back and forth at each other, and it was dark by the time it was over. My sister threatened to call the cops on him unless he returned the car title, and he kept denying having it. But my sister knew just enough about his life to screw him over if she called the cops. And when my sister didn't back down after all of that, the guy just stormed up to his apartment because he couldn't gaslight her into leaving. Then when my sister wasn't looking, he ran back out and threw an envelope through the window of my truck and onto the passenger seat and then ran back in. It was the car title. If I hadn't seen the guy do it, I just know he would have tried to gaslight my sister and say it was there the whole time. Ni idea if she confronted him about it later. Never got the chance to find out. My sister had to go stay with her boyfriend's sister, who was a single mom with 2 kids and another one on the way. I had to drive my sister to go see her, and my sister barely looked up from her phone to give me directions unless I made her. And then she'd get irritated and tell me she was busy. Just about every new turn I needed to make, she'd tall me at almost the last second. After unloading all my sister's stuff, she begged me to take her cat home with me, which I did. That cat was so happy to come back here because he was raised out here. As soon as I pulled in the driveway, he could smell where we were from inside his carrier and went from meowing with worry to purring intensely. And as soon as I let him out, he ran around the yard happy. I have since had this cat chipped and registered in my name because my sister would just take him back to living in a drug den if I allowed her to take him back. My sister spent barely 2 days living with her boyfriend's sister, and the two of them were at each other's throats because my sister is not only impossible to live with, she let her dogs piss and crap all over the bedroom floor and didn't clean up any of it. I had to clean it all up when I got there. My sister's boyfriend managed to get that crappy Volvo running for her, only to grab her by the hair and she had to floor it to get away from him, and that ripped a chunk of her hair out. I met up with her and we packed my truck and that Volvo full of her junk, and then I spent all day driving around with her to multiple places while she tried to find someone to take her in. The problem is, since she's an entitled narcissist, she'd literally burned through 98% of the friend bridges she had. Very few people even responded to her. She even dragged me to a produce farm where they had workers living out of campers, and they weren't willing to take her in either. And in all this time, I was the only one walking all 3 of my sister's pugs. She barely got out of her car to do anything, let alone get off her phone. And even when her phone went dead and had to charge, she did not help. If I even got mad at her, she'd start crying and act pathetic because of her situation. And then she came up with her dumbest excuse yet. She claimed she has split personalities, and that's why she's so mean to people for no reason. I didn't even bother to correct her because she doesn't listen. She was diagnosed bipolar as a teenager and mentally blocked it out. And she's more than likely a narcissist. I've known her my entire life, and she's always been cruel and self-important. Add being an alcoholic and drug addict on top of that, and she's lost her mind, just not in the way she thinks. She doesn't have any symptoms one would expect of split personality disorder. She doesn't identify by 2 different names, or as 2 different people, and she doesn't get any memory loss from personality shifts. She just convinced herself she's got split personalities for sympathy. I really wish I was making this crap up, but it all really happened. After following my sister from place to place for several hours on end with her finding nowhere to live, we ended up parked in front of a convenience store at the beginning of the road home. Or at least home for me, but not for her anymore. She's not allowed on the property at all. We spent hours parked there, while my sister kept calling and messaging people looking for someone to take her in. No one did. What's worse, I found out that day was the last day of her cell phone plan before it was cut off for non-payment because her cell phone plan was through her POS boyfriend. And after that, she could only message me through social media using Wi-Fi. During the hours we were parked in front of this convenience store, my sister drove me ever more crazy with her entitlement. At one point I asked her if she was thirsty, and she said yes, so I went into the store and bought her a big bottle of cold water, and not only was she ungrateful for it, she was mad it wasn't a beer, and then she wanted me to go back in and buy her a beer. I told her I wouldn't facilitate her drinking and driving, and she proceeded to berate and then angrily ignore me for a while. She didn't even drink the water I gave her. On a hunch, I asked her to pop the hood of the Volvo she was driving because the engine sounded a little rough. I checked the oil and there was like none in that engine. I googled the type of oil the car needed and went back into the convenience store. $8 for a quart of oil just so that Volvo's engine wouldn't seize up. Then I asked my sister how much gas she had, and the car was not only on E, the fuel warning light had come on. I was furious, and she'd waited until then to finally tell me. I had no choice but to buy her gas. And that's when she told me that POS car only took premium fuel. Fan-freaking-tastic. You can't make this crap up. I had to pull out $20 from my wallet and told her to go get gas at the nearby station. And then I told her the $20 was for gas only. No beer. She started crying and actually said, "Can't I just get 1 beer?" And I said, "No." She tried to beg, but I was adamant. It was my money, so it was for gas only. I figured she'd get beer anyway, but she actually did as told. She went and got the gas and then came back. She acted nice, but was clearly still upset because I still would not buy her any alcohol. I ended up calling our parents on speaker to give them an update on the situation, and our mother was worried out of her mind, but our parents still refused to let my sister come back home after everything she'd put us and her kids through. Which is a long story in itself, and I just know that if we allowed my sister to come back, even just for a little while, she'd plant herself in my camper trailer and refuse to leave. So I was upfront in advance with my parents that my sister would not be staying in my camper. My mother did admit to wanting to suggest it, if it was just for a night or two, but realized I'd had enough of my sister and didn't ask me. While on the phone, our mother started talking about how she'd get a baseball bat if my sister's boyfriend laid a finger on her again, and also started talking about getting my sister a motel room for the night. Meanwhile, my sister was losing her goddamn mind, having a tantrum in her car, because she has to make our mother the villain in her life. My sister literally can't function unless she has someone to blame and hate. That's how she's always been. During her tantrum, she was flailing her arms around and making incoherent noises. I kept trying to shush her without cluing our mother in, and my sister gave me a glare and rolled up her window to sit and pout. My sister kept refusing to let our mother book her a motel room, and she started yelling that there's no way a motel would let her bring in 3 dogs, and our mother freaking knows it. No, our mother didn't know it. She was literally just trying to help. By this point it was getting dark, and I needed to go home. I called my parents back, and they okay'd me to bring my sister's junk home with me for the moment, but it all had to stay in my truck. I had no choice but to leave my sister to spend the night in her crappy car. So my sister started furiously digging through the back of my truck looking for her dog food, but she couldn't find it. I had to go back into the convenience store and buy her a $12 bag of dog food, and after giving her the dog food, that's when she suddenly said, "She's going to die, you know." And I'm like, "What?" And then she told me our mother was going to die. She went on a rant about how her previous boyfriend died after cheating on her, and the woman he'd cheated on her with also died soon after in something unrelated. My sister said that everyone who crosses her dies, and our mother would be next. I was mortified and got the hell out of there. I told my parents exactly what my sister said, and they were mortified too. As for my sister, she drove that crappy Volvo all the way back to her crappy boyfriend's apartment and just spent the night parked there. Her boyfriend started scaring the crap out of her by getting on his motorcycle and circling the apartment complex, eyeing her like a vulture. And then my sister messaged me through social media in the middle of the night and said her boyfriend was coming for her. He'd literally threatened to unalive her earlier if he went back to prison. My sister apparently heard gunshots and was freaking out, texting me like it was her last moment on Earth. I was ready to call the cops, but she refused to let me and said they were completely useless. Then she texts me near morning and says it was all fine and the gunshots were something unrelated. Then her boyfriend, just to be an a-hole, stabbed one of her Volvo's tires and she had to put on the spare. Our mother got in touch with her and got her that motel room for a night. My sister wasn't very appreciative, and the motel put my poor mother through hell over the phone because they didn't want to book the room without holding her credit card. They made her jump through Lord knows how many hoops just to book the room. And guess what? My sister spent the night in that motel with her 3 dogs in that room, so I guess motels do allow it. But she sure as crap never apologized. And then the following day, when my sister had to leave the motel, she went right back to her crappy boyfriend's place, and then messaged me to just bring her stuff back there. All that crap for the past few days just to end up back where she freaking started. I was pissed, and my parents were pissed. I drove back to the boyfriend's apartment in a fury, all the while practicing a speech in my head to tell my sister exactly what I thought of her. When I got there, my 40-year-old sister was dressed like a teenager in tiny shorts, a tube top, and her hair was tied in a sideways ponytail, which did not flatter her because her face has aged badly from the meth and crack she's addicted to. She looked like she'd be on an episode of Cops any day. Her boyfriend was there constantly, and I didn't want to risk pissing off this nutcase by yelling at my sister in front of him, so I just unloaded all her stuff as fast as I could. Then I gave her some money because I knew she had zilch to her name and told her not to contact us until she goes to rehab or something and turned to walk away. The last word I heard out of her that day was rehab. Just as I was leaving, she sounded like she honestly didn't get why I'd say that. I drove off to get some yellow curry from one of my favorite restaurants, and my sister started messaging me and asking me to please not ignore her. And then she actually said she didn't know she was such a burden on everyone. Seriously? She knows! She's always freaking known. She just has massive denial and main character syndrome. I blocked her that day, and it was a massive relief to do it. She called our parents later, and our mother told her she probably lost me forever. The only time I even let her talk to me as of late was because she wanted her mail. My sister still came back and weaseled a bit more money out of us, though. I went out to eat with my parents, and my sister showed up at the restaurant in tears. She got $50 from our dad and $20 from me. At this point, we were pretty sure all that money was going into her habits. Because before we kicked her out, she was borrowing from me when she already owed me hundreds and owes our parents and grandparents thousands, and she gave me that classic line of a drug addict, "You know I'm good to pay you back." She wasn't even feeding her children, let alone paying her mortgage. Her ex-husband soon took the kids and refused to let her see them as long as her abusive boyfriend was around. Then her boyfriend did end up going back to prison, and my sister has somehow been living off his disability money and gotten an apartment of her own. She also started dumpster diving and apparently found jewelry that she sold to a pawn shop. My sister showed up at my house recently wanting her cat back, and we got in a shouting match and I kicked her off the property. Just days after that, I had the cat chipped and registered in my name. Good lord, this got long. Once I started typing, I just couldn't stop. Anyway, thank you for watching.